everyone. This is Friday the 10th of April 2020. It's now the 15th day since the start of the lockdown here in South Africa due to the coronavirus. This virus is just taking the world by storm in a way that none of us have ever known before. There's just so much uncertainty of the future. I think all of us to some extent are wondering what the future holds for us. Jobs are on the line. A lot of people have already lost their jobs. A lot of people are still expecting to lose their jobs. A lot of people have been basically given leave without pay, forced leave without pay, and they're not sure how they're going to pay the bills. There's just so much uncertainty, and then of course a lot of people are mourning the loss of loved ones and family members. A lot of people might be very worried about their own lives. I think one of the very scary things about this virus is just that it can be in your system for quite some time without you even knowing it, and the symptoms only start showing much later. And I think a lot of us are most worried about infecting others around us, fathers, mothers, grandparents, and friends, and obviously that's a big reason for the lockdown. But I don't mean to make light of this in any way, but just with all this chaos and craziness in the world at the moment, just with this all in mind, I was thinking about a story in the Bible, and I'll just explain very briefly. And it's just one principle, one aspect of the story I want to pull out that I think will be very encouraging for us. The story is found in Judges chapter 20. And long story short, there was the Israelite army came up against the Benjamite army, the tribe of Benjamin. The Israelites outnumbered the Benjamites by, I think there was over 400,000 Israelites in their army, and only something like 26,000 odd Benjamites. But clearly they were a superior army, and it was on their turf. So the Israelites came up against them. First day, the Benjamites just started massacring them. I mean, they chased them down and killed, I think it was around about 22,000 Israelites and Israelite soldiers. And so the Israelites didn't lose heart. They came back another day, and again, they were just put to flight and lost, I think it was over 18,000 men that day. Instead of getting the message and just calling it a day and not coming back again, they decided to come back a third time. And same thing happened. Just were put to flight. It seems like even quicker than the previous times, and started basically running away with their tails between their legs, and the Benjamites started killing them again. I think they killed about 30 men. And I'm going to leave you with a bit of a cliffhanger. I'll come back to that story. There's another story that's got the same principle in it. It's a fascinating story, and you can read about it in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Some of you have probably started to figure out already that I'm talking about Jesus. He was a man unlike any other. I think in all history, he's probably the most well-known character in all history. A lot of ancient historians wrote about him, not just in the Bible. And it's clear that he had a life unlike no one else. He claimed to be the Son of God and did amazing miracles that nobody could explain. He was very popular with many people, but certain people hated him out of jealousy. He was a threat to the religious leaders of the time, and they were very jealous of him. So they started desperately seeking to kill him. And I mean, he never had a place to stay of his own. He would, just stay with whoever would give him a roof over his head, and then he'd sometimes sleep out in the garden, sometimes in a cave, sometimes he wouldn't sleep at all. He'd be up all night praying, and it just seemed like such a waste of life, because in the prime of his life, 33 years old or around there, and he was eventually caught by a rebel army of I think about 100 men, if I remember correctly. Just rebels. They caught him, very roughly dragged him into an illegal hearing, and he was accused falsely of many things, and eventually was taken before the king and the governor. Neither one of them could find any fault in him. They examined him carefully, and they both agreed that there was no fault that they could find in him. He was innocent. He didn't deserve any punishment. Yet he was beaten severely, and eventually, at the threat of rebellion from the people, a very violent gang of people who were threatening rebellion, eventually the governor just surrendered the right to them to do what they liked to him. So he washed his hands of Jesus and he handed him over to them, and he said, "You do it with him what you like." And they brutally murdered him. You think, what a waste of life! Just such a failure. We go back to that story with the Israelites and the Benjamites, that third battle, running away with their tails between their legs and starting to lose lives again. Suddenly, for whatever reason, the Benjamite army started to look behind them, and they saw what was not a big storm cloud. It was a massive pillar of smoke rising very clearly from their city, and they started to panic. They realized that there was more going on than they realized. So just at the peak of this battle, when they really thought they were starting to win and nothing was going to stop them now, they might set a record as to how many people they would wipe out of the opposing army that day. Just as they got to that point, they suddenly realized that they were in trouble. There was more to this battle than met the eye. They all started scattering and running for their lives as the Israelite army turned again to attack them. And again, still more to the story. There was a lot of Israelites hiding in ambush for the Benjamites, and as the Benjamites started scattering, these Israelite soldiers just started jumping up out of the fields, and they encircled around the Benjamite army. They'd completely laid waste to the city, the Benjamite city, and now they were all come out and circled around the Benjamites, and they just slaughtered them. 600 men, that was the entire survivors, that was all the survivors left of the Benjamite army, 600 men who managed to escape, and they just ran for their lives, and they managed to escape. 600 men, that was it. And again, with Jesus, we go back to that story, and we find that at what seemed to be the biggest victory of Jesus' enemies, when they had crucified him, brutally murdered him in their eyes, and he seemed to have lost, that was the time that he was winning his greatest victory. We know 3 days later that he rose from the dead, and he conquered death, and he is now offered to everyone. Every one of us is offered eternal life. So I've got a few verses I want to read to you, and I'd encourage you to just think about these verses, because it explains very clearly. I know Matthew Field just read these the other day, but I want to read them again. Just shows so clearly that there's more to this life than meets the eye. So we can focus on this life, on the physical reality that we're in now. And yes, we're going to get disappointed. It's a pretty scary place, and well, the reality is, if you go back in history, there's no one who survived indefinitely. Every person dies at some point in their lives. So just with that in mind, Matthew chapter 16 and verse 24 on, it says, "Then Jesus said to his disciples, 'If anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what profit is it to a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? Or what will a man give in exchange for his soul? For the Son of Man,'" that's Jesus, "will come in the glory of his Father with his with his angels, and then he will reward each according to his works." A few more verses found in John chapter 16. And in verse 32, This is Jesus speaking to his disciples. He says, "Indeed, the hour is coming, yes, has now come, that you will be scattered, each to his own, and will leave me alone. And yet I am not alone, because the Father is with me. These things I have spoken to you, that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." So my encouragement to you is just to be of good cheer. Sounds crazy, but if we look at the bigger picture, Jesus has overcome the world, and that includes this coronavirus. If we follow him, if we put our trust in him, he's paid the price for our souls. So he's got everything in his hands. If we are prepared to trust him even at the expense of this physical life, he'll give us eternity. And with that in mind, the bigger picture, there's nothing really to worry about. So my encouragement to you is just to realize that things are not always as they seem. We look at a world that's just in chaos, and our lives seem to be in such chaos. But if we look at things from God's perspective, then I think we'll see a different picture.